Hey, welcome to the Chaffin Church podcast. I am Marty Holman here with Sir Ryan Thompson of the Thompson clan.
Is there a Thompson clan? Is that
I mean,
weird?
it almost seems like there is. Aren't you Swedish? Oh, there's no clan. Are there clans in Sweden?
I mean, I feel like there were like 1,000 years ago. I don't clan.
Well, like
I don't
if you're
know. It's
Irish
such a
or
weird
Scottish, well, right in America it is, but not in Europe. I mean, the clan was kind of like, especially in Ireland or Scotland.
I am also Irish,
kind of
so maybe there is
okay.
some sort of clan over there, the Bates clan. But yeah,
Awesome.
maybe. How about you? Are you part of any clans that we need to know about, Pastor Marty?
Well, the Holman clan is mostly English and German.
Oh.
And we came, well, on both sides, there is English. And we came over across the way in the 1700s.
This is a fascinating discussion. Clans. I don't know. That word is it just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know.
It should, right? Here in America, once again, it was taken over. I think here, perhaps tribe is a better, more positive.
Yeah. Sure.
And of course, the Swedish, I'd be interested to see, like, this is a Swedish, or started off as a Swedish church. I would be interested to see if there's a word that be sweet. Maybe we could do some research. And if there's a word for the Swedish tribe.
I probably should have paid more attention in my Swedish history class that I took in seminary at a Swedish denominational seminary. I did, and apparently I did not remember as much as I probably should have.
I mean, that is most people's seminary time. I could read at one point John in Greek, the entire book, and could read it not totally proficiently, but pretty well.
Wow.
And no longer. So there you have it. All right, so I'm going to come out. We're going to talk about Holden. I mean, this is a Holden-based, a Wachusett-based podcast, and we have no guest today. We are each other's guest, and so we're just going to hang out, and we want you to be a part of this conversation. And I wanted to come out and ask you, as we got started, what do you think would make Holden better, or the Wachusett area better? From your perspective, right, which is different from my perspective when we were even talking about this earlier, what would make this area better?
Yeah, so, and maybe this is sort of unfair to Holden a little bit because this is sort of all around right now. It's not just Holden, but I'll say it anyways. As a millennial who would like to buy a house before I die, I would like to see some affordable housing options around here. I don't know if that's at all possible, but I love this area. I want to live in Holden if possible, but at least the Wachusett area, and really all 5 of the towns. I can't afford it. Like I honestly cannot. So that is one thing I would love to see. I have very few complaints about Holden.
Yeah.
So that was just one thing that I thought of that I would love to see at some point. But it's that.
I was thinking about this question. I wrote it down. I wanted to ask you. I wanted to see what you thought. And then I thought, like, my experience here has been so good. Like, so very good. I've been here since 1999 and have enjoyed my time. I would say the intensity of traffic on Main Street at times, is so crazy that I don't know what you would do about it or how you could fix that, especially because the infrastructure, I mean, everything runs through that road.
Right. You do have, actually right outside our church's front door, they are adding a second lane to one side of the street. I do know there have been a lot of conversations about that. I think it was 5 or 10 years ago, so some years back, there was someone who came forward and asked, hey, what if during all the rush hours, you can't make a left turn on Main Street during the rush hour? I don't know, something like that, or maybe wherever there's 2 lanes on both sides of the road. You can't make a left turn or something. I don't know,
Which
something
they do
like
in
that.
some places.
Yeah,
right?
and I'm sure that does, probably sort of quell traffic a certain percentage, but yeah, I think yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, is it a fair ask? Is there an easy solution? I don't know. It's probably fair to ask. There probably isn't an easy solution necessarily, but
I have seen the plans, and they look great. They are taking about 10 feet from the other side, not from the church side, and the plans go all the way to Bank of America, where they're making a walkway. There's not a sidewalk there that connects Main
Right.
Street to here, and so they're making a connection there, and then all the way down to Doyle Road. And so that's happening in 4 years.
okay.
So it's not going to happen tomorrow or anything, but they're doing, the plans look great.
Well, 4 years. I mean, I'm sure we'll have our own version of the Big Dig. We all remember how that turned out. I remember being like a young boy and asking my uncle, like I saw the Big Dig on the news, asking my uncle, like, what's the Big Dig? And he told me this, and I believed it, because I was like, I think I was 8 or 9 at the time. He's like, oh, they're building this big hole in the ground in Boston, and they're just throwing money into it, So I thought literally, I'm like, why would they build a hole and throw money into it? I believed it.
I mean, people's heads rolled for that, metaphorically speaking. People got fired for that. I mean, it was like a 21-year job or something ridiculous that was supposed to be 7 years.
Yeah, and it was billions of dollars over budget. Yeah.
Oh, man, crazy. Well, I hope that's not the case here in the town of Holden. And if it is, heads will roll.
Heads will roll.
This was not planned. Did you vote in the town election?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not, because I was not educated enough. I did not feel that I should have, but I did not.
So I did.
Okay.
And I won't say who. I'm not. But only one of my. There were 6 choices. Three people you could vote for, and apparently I'm not a good chooser, because only one of my people were voted in. But I guess that's fine, right? I was represented, but the Holden town election process was good. The thing was. I think the turnout was good for a town election as well. So great job, Holden. Keep it up. Chaffin salutes you. Good times. Ask a Pastor is the next segment. We have a great show, by the way. I think this is going to be a good conversation. This next question for Ask a Pastor, which I think you have,
yes,
is a great question. So go for it.
So the question is, and this is a question that I received personally a few weeks back, do you take the Bible literally? Why or why not? And I think at the time the question was actually asked to me, there was some more colorful language in there, but that is my sort of transliterated version. So so I'm going to answer that question today. This is actually the first time I have answered this question, this is the first time I've answered the Ask a Pastor section. So I'm very excited about this. So I want to start by just taking a look at the low-hanging fruit, and I'll actually, before I even do that, I'll start by saying no, I do not take the Bible completely literally, and I want to start by addressing those pieces of low-hanging fruit. So first, there's all sorts of figures of speech in the Bible. There's all sorts of metaphorical language. There is imagery used that is we know to not be literal. So if that's what you mean by completely literal, then I mean clearly. I hope when you see in the Psalms David says his bed is full of tears. I hope he's not sleeping in a bathtub, right? Like that's not what's happening, right?
Oh, he slept in a bathtub.
But then there are other ones that are even a little bit more serious than that, right? Like in I think it's Leviticus, take your disobedient children outside the city gates and stone them to death, right? So if we were all to take that portion of the Bible completely literally, I mean, first of all, the human race would cease to exist, because every child is disobedient at times after the age of 2, right? And so all our children would be dead and we'd be gone within a generation. And we'd probably all be in prison too. So it would be pretty miserable if we all followed that to the letter. So I say to the letter, and Jesus and his entire fight that he was constantly in sharp disagreement with the Pharisees, was built upon the Pharisees' legalism. And, legalism being, they took the law, right, which was, it was the Pentateuch, and a few of the other books that are in our Old Testament were considered the law at the time. And the Pharisees tended to take this like very, very literally, and made sure that everyone followed these laws to the letter. And Jesus was constantly trying to reinterpret these scriptures, and to and the phrase he used a lot was, follow the spirit of the law. Follow the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. And I think we've all heard that phraseology, from time to time on a lot of things. And so, but then you have, in the book of Acts, there's this whole idea of binding and loosing. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but basically, the Spirit came to the apostles and said, you need to bind things on earth and loose them on earth so that they can be bound in heaven and loosed in heaven. And so, binding was sort of this idea of, hey, we need to create traditions, and some of them, we need to bind them, as in, we need to stick to them. These are important things that we need to continue to do. And then there's also this idea of loosing, and that's sort of like, sometimes you need to replace a tradition. Sometimes you need to reinterpret like the way you've been doing things and improve upon it. Or maybe you just need to leave something open for interpretation. You don't even need to replace it. So this idea of binding and loosing, look that up. It goes really, that's a like super deep rabbit hole that a lot of people go down, and what does that mean? How much freedom do we have? And I will not attempt to answer that all today. But I think that the general idea, I think overall for me, is that like God is not looking for passive followers. Like he's looking for people, and I'm going to use this term, who are actively obedient. Like people who actually ask good questions. Like when God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he tells Abraham that he's going to destroy them. What does Abraham do? He says, well, isn't that like super unjust, right? Like, isn't that wrong, God? Like, what if you find this many righteous people there? And he sort of like bargains with God. Yeah. Now, this is the guy that's known as the father of the Hebrew faith, and so very, very important. So I think the idea for me is we need to just constantly question and reinterpret the scriptures in our communities. The community is sort of this guiding group that will prevent us from going outside of off the road, outside of the guardrails, however you want to view that. But basically, we never want to take anything totally at face value. Yeah. Even something that Marty says, right? Like, I'm sure Marty will tell you, he doesn't, like when you're sitting there listening to him speak on Sunday mornings, he doesn't want you to be like, oh yeah, great. And that's the end of it, right? That's the end, right? He wants you to get in the car and wrestle with these ideas, like with your family and with your, like we want to carry these around with us and wrestle with it. So, I do think there are some scriptural principles that are, simple. They can be found throughout Scripture, and anyone can sort of grab onto those things. That's sort of like the low-hanging fruit. You can just grab onto those things, and they're probably not ever going to change, right? Like, my life verse is Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God, right? Like, that's something, it's simple. You can find it throughout the scriptures, and that's not going to change. But again, I do think we need to not take almost anything at face value. Even Micah 6:8, what does it mean to, act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with God? What is behind that, right? And so, I really think we need to keep questioning and keep growing. So that's why I think we should not take the scriptures completely literally all the time. We need to be careful about that.
I think one of the reasons why this question is so important, like when I was growing up, 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
70s, 80s, and today, there was this idea that, and there even is to some, but there was this idea that America was this Christian nation, and it was. I mean, they're like, it was in this certain way, in the same way that several hundred years before Europe was, right? You know how things get faster and move faster with technology, right? And so there was this new way of communication through like the Pony Express, or there were these different ways in America. And so America had revolved, and then Alexander Graham Bell on the phone, and America had revolved into this Christian nation, I think, in the same way that the Catholic faith had evolved in the Middle Ages. I say the Dark Ages, some people call it that. In that they were the ones who said, this is how the Bible is to be taken. And so all of a sudden, the Protestant church lived this out in America, in the West. And so now we are reaping the consequences. And I say consequences, I think there are some very big consequences in this is the way you have to look at Scripture. Because now you have a whole world of churchianity that is falling apart because pastors are falling into sin. And what does that look like? Well, certainly they're not living out the Bible literally, right? Like they're living their own way and walking away. What happens when your pastor falls? What happens when your spiritual guide is not living the way that he's teaching? Man, Ted Haggard, the Carl Lentz, doesn't matter what generation in the last 30 years, you've probably experienced, if you followed church for the last 30 years, you've probably experienced some sort of hypocrisy.
Right.
And that's why following the Spirit of God is so important. I mean, Jesus talked about this all over the place. We're actually going to look into this in a little bit. I think your view is really powerful, and it's important, and it's a great discussion to continue to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, the Bible, the Word is a living, breathing thing. It's described as that in the Scripture. So, and what do living, breathing things do? They move.
Yeah.
Our culture moves. We move. It's like two objects constantly in motion, and our perspectives are they're going to change. They have to, like it's the way it is. So it's just, and biblical literalism is just, like you mentioned, it's one of like the tent pegs of fundamentalism,
Yes.
within Christianity. There's always a group that, oh no, I people are drifting away from, the literal and they will try to scare you into, taking whatever their version of taking it literally is, even though there's no such thing because they have to interpret it to get to whatever their literal meaning is. And
what's so scary about that is how connected it is to some people's political worldview.
Yes.
And I am, if we were to talk, and we kind of already know this, I am more conservative politically than you are. However, there's no denying, I just want to, I would say that my conservatism is more based on my desire for independence for personal responsibility than for my theological beliefs, right? And I would say that gladly, like I never want to pretend that my beliefs as a person, as an American, should somehow overcome, because it's so easy to do, my beliefs as a Christian. because the Christianity should always, always come first. And so when confronted with that, that's a hard tension to manage. It really is.
It's like your faith, it's operating in a cultural context, but it can't be like subdued by it. And it's this very kind of funky thing that you have to kind of keep in check, right? But I think we're a little bit off our original question here. But so I think from what you've said, neither Marty and I would say, take the Bible completely literally. And like we said, there's some low-hanging fruit there, like, David sleeping in a bathtub, which he did not do. And then you have...
I was making a pun.
Do not stone your children to death. Please do not do that.
Please.
And therefore, do not take the Bible completely literally. So.
And on that note, we're going to go to part 2 of our conversation and family reunion. So part 1, if you go back to...
I think it was episode 2.
Episode 2.
Episode 2.
Which was how to, not the resurrection one, how to not sin. No, that was with Coach.
Yep.
It was really good, whatever it was. And you should check out episode 2. But Ryan and I had a conversation around our past working life in 2009 or 10 to 2015. And then Ryan Ryan left, and I made a joke earlier about that when we were off camera. And he left and went to Lifesong Church, which is a great place across the in Millbury. And then you went to Washington.
Washington State, yeah.
So we kind of stopped at Lifesong, and so we'll talk for a little bit about Washington State. What happened there?
Yeah, so basically, I decided as my time at Lifesong was coming to an end that I really wanted to keep doing church ministry, but it felt like at the time I had sort of burned a lot of my connections in the church world, just locally in the Worcester area. I didn't want to really leave Worcester. I wanted to stay in the general area. So the only place left that I had like a lot of connections was with the Evangelical Covenant Church, which is a small church denomination that I grew up in. And so I spoke with a couple people, and they like strongly recommended that I attend seminary. And so so I thought about it, I prayed about it, and I really felt like God was telling me, like, look, seminary, like, that's where you need to go. That's what you need to do. And so, and then, like, within 2 days of deciding that I was going to do that, there was this internship opportunity that was presented to me. And I had, like, I had 24 hours. I had 1 day to decide if I was going to move across the country and spend a year of my life, on the other side of the country. And I know some of you probably did like time abroad or whatever, but for me, this is a big deal. I'm sort of I love Central Massachusetts, don't want to leave. But I decided this will be great. This will be a great place to do a seminary internship. And the person that I worked for came just very, very highly recommended. And so I went and I worked there. So it's a very good church, small church in sort of like a farming community. In Yakima Valley in Washington, it's where 80% of the beer hops in the country are grown. So I was very surprised when I first got there, and the first thing like every family wanted to do was take me out to a brewery after church. That was sort of like the thing that you did, on the weekends.
What's up, Chaffin Church?
Yeah, well, who's going to take Marty to a brewery? Come on now. I'm not really a big beer guy or alcohol guy in general, but there was a lot of good beer, a lot of good conversations there. But honestly, it got a little bit lonely. It's just a more rural place, not a whole lot of young people my age.
How big was the church?
I think it was like 200 people-ish. Okay. And so I was the pastoral intern, spent a lot of time working with the youth and just with technology and stuff like that. And so I did the internship, and then I went on to the actual physical, seminary location in Chicago, and I did 2 out of 3 years of my seminary degree. But I'm going to turn back to Marty before I tell you why I stopped, because Marty's side of this story, definitely continued as well. So why don't you go ahead with your side of it?
My life stopped with depression and difficulty. So at 2015, I came to I think I was tired. We had gone through. We had done so well, and yet we had not like broke through like the 200 barrier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and
the 200 barrier, just so you know, like in the church growth world, the 200 barrier is like it's like the capital T, the 200 barrier. It's a big deal. Like if you can break 200, chances are you're probably going to keep going, and then the next barrier is like 500. That's usually how it
and they're much and the 200 is the hardest one. They
Yes.
say like.
Yeah.
So it was one of those where I just felt tired is the best way I could say. Like I didn't see a push forward or getting beyond that point.
Yeah, so you figured I can sustain this, but I can't really like.
I didn't see it,
Yeah.
and so I had a lot of friends, who were who were pastors who I'd spent time with in the area in New Hampshire, like Anthony Milas, and one of them was a guy from New Hampshire, and his name was Josh Gagnon. So I went to Josh and I said, what would it look like for us to become Next Level Church? And we talked about it, and it was a good conversation. I liked the guy. I guess I didn't know him all that well, but I knew him, right? You don't know pastors all that well unless you do, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I know probably 2 or 3 guys who are pastors right now well, besides my dad. And so we talked, and I brought it back to our board. They were like, that's pretty intense, right?
So when you say we become Next Level Church, you mean, and your idea at the time was we will become a campus of Next Level Church.
Yes, a campus. So we were our own entity, and we would become a campus. They had, I think, 4 or 5 at the time.
And can you just, for our viewers who maybe aren't familiar with like the multi-location model, like what does that mean, a campus?
So essentially, there is a large nucleus of people. They're in Somersworth, New Hampshire, in this scenario. There's like Lifesong Church, right? Has a large nucleus in Millbury, or I think it's in Sutton now. And so then they are so successful, maybe they have a group of people in York, Maine, which is about a half hour away, that come to church. So they'll start a location there in
so it's sort of like, it's like a mothership with like some smaller ships, and the ships are churches,
correct,
right? Yeah,
correct. Life Church in Oklahoma does this. A lot of big churches now do this. And so I thought this would be a good way for me to learn, what does it take? Mm-hmm. What does it take to get beyond 200, right? Mm. So we did it, and the board went with me. To the board's credit, the board kind of followed me in that. And I look back at that. We've talked fondly about those days at Fellowship. Yeah. And I look back at the wisdom of that board, like just... they asked me some hard questions, but they went with it, and we did it. On Mother's Day of 2015, we became Next Level Worcester. So
like almost 6 years to the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. 6 years ago, and things went swimmingly. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I learned for 2 years. We went from 150 really, to about 350 in attendance.
Wow.
And that was like for 2 or 3 months in a row. We had that number. And then, whether this was a good move or not, I don't know. So we could get into nuts and bolts, but they wanted me to go from Showcase North in Worcester where we had moved
Yeah.
to Mount View here in Holden. And what happened was, it was a brand new building, but what happened was people in Worcester stopped coming. Not en masse, not like everybody from Worcester.
And because I remember, if I can sort of take a guess at why this is. So, like, that area around Showcase and then you had Price Chopper, which is now Market 32 there.
Yep.
It almost felt like it was part of Holden. Like it sort of looked like it was,
Yes.
because the highway, the on-ramp to the highway was there, but like the highway wasn't right there.
Yep.
And it just, so it sort of felt like Holden,
Yeah.
So people from Holden had no problem going there, but technically it was Worcester, so people from Worcester, were fine going there. So we did our homework, and we thought culturally back when Fellowship was around, this is the perfect place. And we tried to think about buying a building on that street a couple times, but it just, each time it fell through. But we did a lot of homework on that. That Showcase North was like, it was a good spot for that.
So this is a whole story, and we've been at a half hour, and I'm just going to kind of skip to this point because I think this is an important point about who I am today and where I've come from. At some point in that, so all the locations were doing well. We were doing, I would say, both financially and people-wise, particularly well. Okay. And I was kind of looking and asking other location pastors, but it was really weird because the leadership didn't want us to know each other's stats.
What?
Right, like we worked together, but we were told we weren't like allowed to ask each other's stats, and it was just so weird. So, but I found out, and essentially, the leadership of that church in the summer of 2017 made some decisions, which by the time 2018 rolled around, it became clear that there was a different way of being. If you were to name what I love about church in one word, what would it be?
Community.
Right. Community was no longer looked at as important at all.
And it was funny because towards the very beginning of the transition, when you guys became a Next Level Church, I got like a flurry of text messages then. I mean, and I had just left too, but it was like, hey, what's going on, Ryan? I'm like, I have no idea. I'm gone, but then in like 2017, I actually started to get more text messages again. Like some people were like, what's going on here? And I'm like, once again, I'm no longer there. I don't know, but literally, 2017, we were growing, and then by the end of it went bad. And there was just that feeling that community wasn't important to a church, that the foundation that we had built was community. So community was no longer important, and essentially, I was asked to move to New Hampshire. I almost said I was asked to leave. I wasn't originally asked to leave. So perhaps this is a good moment for me to pick up my part of the story.
Yes.
So Marty was asked to move to New Hampshire, and I want to say it was within the same month. So this was in 2017.
Yep.
I was trying to. I had done my 2 years of seminary, so about halfway through, started looking into planting a church. Like I said, I still loved the Worcester area. I knew I wanted to land the plane here rather than in Chicago, which is where the seminary was. So started doing some of my courses online, came back home here to Holden, and I was trying to plant a church in the Worcester area. I was having some conversations with Marty at that point, and I got his blessing. And he's like, "Hey, if it works out, please plant a church in the area." And it did not work out. So what ended up happening is they sort of had this like job interview almost in the denomination that I wanted to plant with. To the point where if I can't plant with this denomination, I don't want to plant a church kind of thing. That's how much I wanted to plant with them.
Okay.
So they have this job interview process called a church planting assessment center. And so you would go and you would get assessed. I was the only single person there. Like everyone else was there were 30 couples and me. So it was very odd.
Oh man, Ryan, that's crazy.
So I flew out to Denver. We were out there, my first time in Colorado. And so I went out there, and basically the long story short is I didn't make it through. Like they were like, hey, you have some student loan debt, maybe, pay a lot of that off. And like, you're not ready yet, for that and another reason or two. And I was absolutely crushed, like totally crushed. And so I was continuing with my seminary classes, but I was doing the bare minimum. It was like one class a semester. I came home, I got like super depressed. I grew out like a fairly long beard. It wasn't maybe not as long as like Billy McGinnis's beard back in the day, but it was a fairly lengthy beard for me. And I was an Uber driver in Boston. I gained like 40 pounds, and I just looked and felt like terrible, And so it's a rough year. 2018 the second half of 2017, first half of 2018 was awful for me. But eventually, the denomination that I wanted to plant a church with, so literally the guy that said no to me actually gave me a call in early 2018, and he was like, hey, we have a position opening up at our office, and I know, we had said no to church planting for now. I'm wondering if you wanted to come and maybe try, applying for this position. Wow. We think you probably would make a great fit. And so I applied and I got the job. So here I am. So I was working for literally the guy that told me no to church planting.
Yeah.
Essentially the person that activated my depression for a year, I'm working for that guy. And now we're like super good friends. So I still work for that church denomination. I no longer work in the church planting department, but that's sort of how I got to where I am today. And then I was working in Chicago right before the pandemic, came home to take care of my mom, who was going through chemotherapy at that point. So that's kind of how the thread connects to now. I worked in Chicago for 3 years, and now I'm back here working remotely for the same church planting denomination. And before I got back, Marty and I had spoken quite a bit about Chaffin, because he had just taken the job there at the time.
So I didn't go to New Hampshire, basically because I felt I was going to go to New Hampshire and get fired. Just being honest, I thought these people were going to fire me. So I said no, and they said, well, you don't have a job in Worcester. And I said, well, then I quit. So that's kind of what happened. And my family and I went to Spain, which is fantastic. I mean...
how long were you in Spain?
Just over a month.
Okay.
Yeah, it was so good. I mean, Valencia, Spain. And then came back, and then Carrie and I went to Spain with a group of people from her school at Neshoba Regional High School. We went twice, yeah. We went to Madrid, Sevilla, and one other place, which was amazing. It was awesome. And then Chaffin Church hired us, and we've had a great time here. And we brought in Ryan and Al and Dan and Amanda is our new moderator. It's just the way that things have worked out with our team, and people are coming together.
And you've probably heard over the last couple of episodes, about sort of, even Marty and I do this, but everyone does it. Every once in a while, we sort of compare, what we're doing here at Chaffin to fellowship. It's a natural human thing.
It is. It would be difficult not to.
But Chaffin is different. Right? It's a different experience. A lot of the same people, a lot of people who used to be at Fellowship are now at Chaffin. There's a lot of new people, who came in. Some of those were at Next Level too that I never met.
Okay.
And then still on top of that, there are new people who are at neither. So it's just it's really really interesting how it's shaping up.
And as we move forward, we want to continue to, in 1905, their purpose, the Swedish people's purpose here, were to spread the good news of Jesus. And that's what they said here. And that's what we want to continue to do. And we want to do it in a community-based way here in the middle of the community of Holden. And so thanks for checking that out. We're going to move toward the message part of our time here. And I want to share a passage of scripture from John chapter 17. Ryan, do you like to pray?
I do.
Do you?
I do.
All right. Well, when some people pray, it's outstanding. Do you know anyone who, when they pray, it's like, whoa? Do you know anyone like that? Like, you might constitute like a prayer warrior or somebody who you're like, whoa, that person is on another level of prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
There are people who can pray, and then there are people who can pray. I knew this lady once, her name was Pauline. And Pauline was like that. Like when she would pray, it would like just kind of dominate everyone's attention. And amazing lady. But Jesus could pray. Right? I mean, obviously, if anyone could pray, it makes sense that he could really pray. And he prayed in John 17, and this was at the end of his ministry. And he prays for three things in this passage of scripture we're going to look at. This is part of the lectionary experience of the week. John 17. And Jesus says this. I use the Message. I rarely use the Message. But I recently read Eugene Peterson's autobiography, official autobiography, from a kid I grew up with. Actually wrote it. And the Message says this. This is Jesus praying. I spelled out your character, meaning God's character, in detail to the men and women you gave me. They were yours in the first place, and then you gave them to me. And they have now done what you said. So he's going to pray for three things here. They know now, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that everything you gave me is firsthand from you. For the message you gave me, I gave them. And they took it and were convinced that I came from you. They believed that you sent me. So he's talking about the disciples. I prayed for them. I'm not praying for the God-rejecting world, but for those you gave me. For they are yours by right. Everything mine is yours, and yours mine, and my life is on display in them. For I'm no longer going to be visible in this world. He's talking about him leaving the earth. They'll continue in the world while I return to you. Holy Father, guard them as they pursue this life that you conferred as a gift through me, so they can be one heart and mind as we are one heart and mind. So the first thing he prays for is unity. Unity is so important in the Christian life. And yet, in America, there's so much disunity. I've been working on this in my social media. We were talking about the town elections recently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And this particular lady who I consider a friend kind of bit my head off. There was a little snarky. I don't want to be exaggerative. Kind of bit my head off, right? Snarky. And in the course of the snarkiness, I responded in love and said, you know what, you're awesome. Like something that wasn't sarcastic, and I made sure that she knew it wasn't sarcastic. But I think this is important because we're called to be unified. And so many times, I'm very competitive. And I hurt my Christian testimony of unity that Jesus has prayed for by my competition so far. I mean, what do you think would help a church be more unified?
Well, I think the first thing that I always think of is just knowing what unity actually is. And I think what a lot of people think of is actually uniformity, not unity. They think, oh, we all need to believe the same thing or act exactly the same way or have like the same culture and preferences. Like, that's not true.
Right.
You know, like the challenge of unity is having that diversity of thought and culture and history and preferences and all of and just even basic worldviews on certain issues, right? And then loving each other, right?
Yeah.
And then still being united, like that. I think that's the challenge. That would just be my only thing I could think of. But.
Awesome. I mean, it's so important. Let's work on being unified, even in our community, with people in general. Jesus continues here, as long as I was with them, I guarded them in the pursuit of the life you gave through me. I even posted a night watch, and not one of them got away, except for the rebel bent on destruction, the exception that proved the rule of Scripture. Now I'm returning to you. I'm saying these things in the world's hearing, so my people can experience my joy completed in them. So the second thing he prays for is for joy, specifically for the believer. And experiencing joy is so important and difficult, especially during times like COVID.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the world is a difficult place. What are experiences or ways that you have felt the most joyful?
During
as a
COVID?
believer? Anytime.
I think most of them have revolved around community. You know, like my fondest memory, like actually, I think in my entire life, like just being a part of that team at Fellowship that went to the movie theater, and there was so much that we didn't know how to do, and we overcame so many obstacles, and then we were so close.
Yeah.
You know, just like, you know, the worship team, we were really, you know, tight knit, and we just had these epic, like, I just remember this one Halloween party we had, and it was so many funny, just random things, you know, just very, very joyful, even though, like, you know, there were some hard things going on at the time as well. You know,
Isn't that the point, though? That joy, you know, we say this, that joy kind of can override difficult circumstances. So it's not necessarily happiness, right?
Right.
But there's something in general that is propelling you to rise above your circumstances, and that is creating this joy, like this fondness about your overall circumstances. I don't know, it's just amazing.
Well, what is, I know we don't have too much time here, but just very, like, maybe the 30-second version. What is the difference between happiness and joy?
I mean, I think that joy is realizing that you're not alone, both in human-wise and God-wise, right? It's this idea that, like, the opposite of joy is and maybe a type of depression, not a clinical one, but a feeling of loneliness, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is that we're meant to live in a functional community, to have a tribe, and that's so important, because, and the difficulty is that joy, and this can happen in churches all the time, is that joy, that those tribes can be manufactured, and worse yet, manipulated, right, for someone's own end. And I think, the fellowship thing, and you even talking about that, right, this has gone longer than 30 seconds. I'll make sure good news is short. There was nothing necessarily being manipulated in terms of for someone's ultimate gain. Like, right. Nobody was getting rich. Nobody was, making out with their own Swedish bank account, or not Swedish, I'm not sure why I said Swedish, but Cayman Islands bank account. Like, it was just people were working hard to accomplish a goal together, and right. They were doing it in this season of life that was good. And, when you put yourself, those are risky times, right? Those are risky relationships because you could get hurt. But the feeling of loneliness, you can get hurt too, right? And so I think joy is the realization that you're not alone, both in humanity and a much larger picture of God.
That's good.
And then Jesus continues, and now I'll make this quick. I gave them your word. The godless world hated them because of it, because they didn't join the world's ways, just as I didn't join the world's ways. I'm not asking that you take them out of the world, but that you guard them from the evil one. They are no more defined by the world than I am defined by the world. Make them holy, consecrated with the truth. Your word is a consecrating truth. In the same way that you gave me a mission in the world, I gave them a mission in the world. I give them a mission in the world. I'm consecrating myself for their sakes, so there'll be truth consecrated in their mission. Thirdly, he prays for holiness. But here's what's interesting. He doesn't pray for holiness to simply keep them away from the world. He prays for holiness so there'll be truth consecrated in their mission. So that means you were talking earlier about active obedience, right? Mm-hmm. And so that we are, as a church, moving forward to do what we're called to do. We're not trying to stay away from the evil world, right? We're doing what we're called to do in the midst of the hard things of the world. And we're not staying away from rock music. It's just so unbelievable what I went through. Rock music or the movies. But we're living in the world, and we're asking God, protect us from the difficulties, the hardships, and help us to stay focused on the mission that you've given to us. With this church, since 1905, it's to spread the good news of Jesus. And so maybe you have a personal one, maybe I have a personal one, and so that's where we're at. And speaking of the good news of Jesus, Ryan, it's time for Chaffin Good News.
So smooth. So smooth.
Hey, the Chaffin Good News here in Holden. The amusement parks, as of yesterday, the amusement parks in Massachusetts, the theme parks, and the outdoor water parks. By the way, if you're going to an outdoor water park today, you are awesome, because I would not.
It's impressive.
They're at 50% capacity. They're opened up at 50% capacity. And athletic arenas, including Polar Park, are open at 25% today. I, by the way, had tickets to Polar Park, and I am here.
You're a good man, Ryan. You're a good man.
I honestly, I tried to make it work, so I didn't even get to asking you because so many other things fell through that I just couldn't do it. So good news, we are opening up. Things are happening. It's just so exciting. Like literally, you could feel it on Sunday here. And, like the people coming back, the excitement. It's just good.
Well, can I just, I don't know if this is too personal, but you got your second shot this week, or was it your first?
Second.
It was your second shot?
Yeah.
There you go.
Got it. It's done.
Hey, things are moving forward. Like I know so many people that have gotten their shots now. I want to say, I think I heard on the TV the other day, it was like that 60% of Massachusetts has at least gotten one vaccination now. It's like,
yeah.
It's really getting up there.
It's incredible. Some birthdays. Pastor Robin Bartlett of First Church in Sterling. I'm not sure what she turned, so I'm not going to say it, but her birthday was this week. Libby DeMice.
That is the third time she's been on Chaffin Good News since we instituted it.
It's
sometime last year.
She was vaccinated, and there was something else. I can't remember what the other thing was.
It was the anniversary. Their anniversary.
Their anniversary.
I think it was that. Yeah.
Oh.
So I remember I didn't know how to pronounce her last name, Libby. I'm sorry, I don't know how to, but I didn't know, and I had to ask you. That's how I remember that.
Okay, and then Shane Bradwell, who attends Chaffin Church, and then Cynthia or Cindy Goulet. She attends Chaffin Church as well. Exciting stuff. Happy birthday to you. And that's what we got for the Chaffin Good News. Not a lot of announcements. Last weekend we had like everything in that weekend. I'm so glad that weekend's over. It was such an amazing time. But we are instituting, I don't even know if I've told you this, so this would be exciting.
This is an announcement for me, apparently.
We are instituting community cookouts starting in June. Did I tell you that?
I don't think we have personally discussed it, although I think I heard it this past Sunday. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe I said it. Okay. So community cookouts are happening in June. And what those are, we'll just have weekly time where we can get together and have cookouts as a church and build community.
Have I told you that when you're at those cookouts, it's like Marty in like his native habitat. Like it really is. Like he just goes around and just spreads cheer and.
You might say I spread good news.
It's almost. We'll get there.
Uh,
Buddy the Elf.
do you like, now here's the
Buddy the
question,
Elf.
because you're an introvert. Do you hate those?
No.
Do you like them?
No, I like them. Good food. You get to hang out with people, and you can, when you get sick of it, you can leave whenever you want. I mean, what's not to love
It's a
about
solid
that?
point.
I mean, I usually stay the whole time, and I love it.
Okay.
But, yeah.
It's interesting. That's what I got. That's what we got for today. Please, if you enjoyed our podcast, would you rate and review it on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Podcasts or wherever podcasts are played. Also, if you have a podcast platform that we are not on, let us know. Maybe we can make that happen.
And let's not forget about YouTube either.
Thank you.
You know, we have a podcast, but we also have a video podcast. And so, by the way, if there's ever something that we're talking about, like maybe Marty and I are like holding up a poster on the video podcast or something, and we're like, look at this, you know, and you're listening to the audio podcast and you're just like, what the heck is wrong with you, you know?
Yeah.
And you can't see it. Just shoot us a message and be like, guys, like we couldn't see that. That didn't make sense. Please let us know. We're still getting used to it. You know, this is only episode 7, but hopefully you're liking it so far.
And you can subscribe to it in any of those platforms. Also, I did create a Facebook group, which you can't be a part of, Chaffin Church Podcast Facebook group.
I can't be a part of it because Marty hates me. And I don't have a Facebook.
If you are interested in supporting us here at Chaffin Church, please, you can go to chaffin.church/giving, or you can text any amount to 84321, or send your gifts to 155 Shrewsbury Street in Holden, 01520.
And those gifts are all tax deductible.
Yeah.
We were just talking about taxes earlier. It's tax deductible. That's pretty cool.
This is a solid point.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, can't wait to see you guys next week. Thank you for participating. And I forgot what I usually say. Do you remember?
You say, and that, and that's the good news for today. And something.
Now go and give some out.
See, we helped each other through that. It's so cool. Have a good one, guys.
Peace.